Before this story begins, I need to warn you. What you are about to hear is no ordinary tale. It is a story soaked in betrayal, drenched in seduction, and stained forever with the kind of secret that destroys families. In the bustling heart of Lagos, where wealth and status often dress up wounds that never heal, one family found themselves entangled in a darkness so deep that even the city lights could not expose it. And yet, as shocking as this story may sound, it is real. It happened, and it left behind scars that no money, no mansion, no prayer could erase. If this is your first time here, I invite you. Pause for just 1 second. Subscribe to this channel now, because stories like this are not fiction. They are lessons. They are warnings. They are mirrors showing us what we try to hide. And stay with me until the very last second of this story, because only then will you see the full weight of how love, lust, betrayal, and family collided in a way no one could ever imagine. This is not just about a man. This is not just about a woman. This is about a family consumed by desire and the haunting truth that came after. Imagine a night when the entire household was asleep. The air was heavy, thick with silence. And yet, in one room of the mansion in Lekki, a storm was about to break. A mother sat alone, trembling, with a pregnancy test in her hand. The faint blue lines on the stick glowed in the dim light, cutting through her like a blade. It was supposed to be impossible. It was supposed to be unthinkable. But it was true. She, the mother-in-law, was pregnant. And the child growing inside her belonged not to her late husband, not to some stranger from the city, but to her son-in-law, her daughter's husband. At that moment, she felt a cocktail of emotions, a strange thrill, a devastating fear, and a twisted sense of victory. She had crossed the line long ago, but now there was no going back. The world outside still saw her as the respectable woman she pretended to be, elegant, powerful, a mother to be admired. But in the shadows, in the privacy of her heart, she had become something else, a woman who seduced her own daughter's husband until he became hers. Lagos was alive that night. The sounds of distant cars, the restless horns, the hum of nightlife, it all seemed to mock her, because the city thrives on secrets. And in Lagos, secrets have a way of crawling into the open. But before we get to how this came to be, we must go back to where the cracks began to show. In Lagos, weddings are not just unions of love. They are exhibitions of wealth, of pride, of family legacy. Years earlier, her daughter had married a man many considered the perfect son-in-law. Young, ambitious, already successful in business, and carrying the charisma that could make even strangers lean in when he spoke. Their wedding was the kind Lagos remembers. Designer gowns, luxury cars, champagne that flowed endlessly, and a hall decorated like a palace. To many, it was the ultimate dream. To her, as the mother-in-law, it was her victory as well. Her daughter had married well. She could boast among her friends that her family's legacy was secure. But beneath the laughter and dancing, beneath the smiles and photo shoots, a seed of something darker was already planted. Because while others admired the groom as a son, she had felt something she should not have felt. It was small at first, a thought, a fleeting feeling when he greeted her respectfully, when he smiled, when his cologne lingered in the room after he left. She told herself it was nothing, that it was the natural admiration of a woman for a man her daughter was lucky to have. But admiration is a seed, and when watered by loneliness, bitterness, and the hunger of a woman who had been widowed too long, it can grow into something dangerous. Her own marriage had been loveless for years before her husband's death. He had left her with wealth, yes, but wealth without warmth is an empty prison. And so, in her quiet moments, she found herself thinking about the one man she should never have thought of, her son-in-law. After the wedding, the couple moved into a mansion in Lekki Phase 1. A house so grand that its walls echoed with both luxury and loneliness. The mother-in-law visited often, sometimes uninvited. At first, it was natural. She was the mother. She came to support her daughter, to help with the home, to enjoy the company of family. But slowly, her visits became something else. She would arrive when her daughter was away. She would linger when her son-in-law was home. And in the hidden language of body movement, of lingering glances, of words unsaid, something began to take root. Lagos has a way of feeding desire. The city is fast, hot, indulgent. And in that environment, temptation does not always look like temptation. Sometimes it looks like comfort. Sometimes it looks like laughter over wine. Sometimes it looks like a hand brushing too close. For him, at first, it was harmless. He was a man admired by many women, but he stayed loyal to his wife. He thought nothing of the extra warmth in her mother's voice, or the way her eyes lingered on him longer than necessary. But seduction is not always loud. It is slow. It creeps in. It wraps itself around you until you can no longer see where the line is. And she was relentless. Every gesture, every word, every visit was calculated. Her loneliness became a weapon, her wealth, her charm, her experience as a woman. All of it she used to lure him into her world. And while he resisted at first, even a strong man can fall when temptation is patient enough. It was a night like any other when the boundaries finally broke. Her daughter was away on a business trip. The house was quiet. Lagos outside was alive with its usual chaos, but inside, silence pressed against the walls. She came to the mansion under the excuse of checking in. Dinner turned into wine. Wine turned into laughter. Laughter turned into a touch that lingered too long. And that night, the one line that should never have been crossed was crossed. For him, it was a mistake that filled him with guilt the next morning. For her, it was the fulfillment of a desire she had nursed for years. But what neither of them realized was that it was only the beginning. Because seduction, once successful, does not end with a single night. It hungers for repetition. It demands more. And as the weeks turned into months, as their secret deepened, as their stolen nights grew in number, the inevitable happened. She became pregnant. And with that, the house in Lekki that once symbolized success and love would soon become a battlefield of betrayal, shame, and destruction. This is not an ordinary story. It is a real-life tale whispered in the alleys of Lagos, spoken in hushed tones in salons, and carried like smoke across neighborhoods where secrets live longer than the truth. And if you are here watching this right now, I need you to pause and breathe. Because the journey we are about to take is one filled with love, twisted into lust, respect turned into betrayal, and desire dressed in the cloak of family loyalty. This is not just entertainment. This is a mirror, showing us the weaknesses we all try to hide. So if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe now. Because these stories, raw, unfiltered, and unforgettable, come to you every week. And you should not miss the lessons they carry. Stay until the very end, because what begins as seduction tonight will end in a tragedy so deep that it left scars across generations. Lagos is a city where love is rarely pure. It is often dressed in gold, measured in the size of the ring, the cost of the hall, the power of the families joined together. But for this young couple, love was real, at least in the beginning. She was the daughter of wealth, raised in luxury, shielded from the harsher sides of life. Her mother had made sure of it. The girl had been taught to walk with elegance, to marry well, to never settle for less. He was the dream son-in-law, a businessman who had conquered the chaos of Lagos markets with his intelligence and determination. He was not just rich, he was respected. To many, he was proof that hard work could turn dust into diamonds. When they married, their love looked like a fairy tale. The wedding had been broadcast across social media. Gowns flown in from Paris, cars imported from Germany, photographers hired from Dubai. The mother-in-law glowed with pride, telling everyone her daughter had married into greatness. But pride is a dangerous thing, because what looks like victory in the eyes of the world can sometimes hide rot beneath the surface. Behind her daughter's joy, the mother-in-law carried a wound of her own. She had been widowed too young. Her late husband, though wealthy, had left her with years of neglect. Their marriage had been loveless, mechanical, empty. And now, in her 50s, she found herself with no companion, no intimacy, no affection, only money and status to keep her warm at night. So when her daughter's husband came into her life, she saw in him what she had been starved of: attention, masculinity, a man who listened, who smiled, who carried himself with confidence. At first, she told herself it was admiration, but admiration is a seed, and every time she saw them together, laughing, holding hands, kissing like newlyweds, something inside her twisted. Loneliness is a hunger, and hunger always looks for food. It did not begin with touch. It began with eyes, a glance that lingered too long across the dinner table, a look that traveled from his face down to his shoulders and stayed there before snapping back. At first he thought nothing of it. She was his wife's mother, after all. He respected her. He called her Mama. He treated her with the politeness expected in African families. But for her, every look carried a secret meaning. Every time he entered the room in his crisp suits, smelling of power and success, she felt something rise within her, something she had long buried. She studied him, the way he smiled when he closed a business deal, the way he loosened his tie when he got home, the way he stretched his arms after a long day. These were ordinary things to his wife, but to her they were fuel. And slowly she began to test the waters. A hand that brushed against his when passing a plate, a laugh that lasted longer than necessary, a compliment spoken in a tone that was just slightly different from a mother's. He ignored it at first. He told himself he was imagining it. But Lagos is a city of temptation, and temptation does not always come in strangers. Sometimes it comes in family. The mother-in-law began to visit often, too often. She came with excuses. Sometimes it was to check on her daughter. Other times it was to help with the home. And sometimes it was simply because she said she felt lonely. But slowly, her visits became strategic. She came when she knew her daughter would be at work. She lingered when she knew her son-in-law would be home alone. She filled the spaces her daughter could not. When her daughter traveled for business, she was there. When her daughter stayed late at the office, she cooked dinner for him. When her daughter was too tired to talk, she listened. It was not accidental. It was a campaign. A slow, calculated seduction. And in Lagos society, appearances are everything. To outsiders, she was simply a caring mother. But behind the walls of that mansion, She was a woman weaving a dangerous web. She began dressing differently. Softer fabrics, closer fits, colors that complemented her skin. Nothing too obvious, just enough to be noticed. And he noticed. He tried to shake it off, to remind himself who she was. But late at night, when his wife was asleep, he sometimes found the image of her mother flashing through his mind. Guilt is a strange thing. It does not always stop desire. Sometimes it fuels it. It happened one evening, after months of subtle advances. His wife was away on a business trip. The house was quiet. He returned home tired, his mind heavy with the day's work. She was already there, waiting, with dinner prepared and wine on the table. It was not unusual. She had done it many times before. But that night, something was different. Maybe it was the way she looked at him. Maybe it was the way the wine loosened his thoughts. Maybe it was simply the accumulation of months of tension, finally breaking free. They laughed more than usual. Their hands brushed more than usual. And when she leaned just a little closer, when her hand rested on his shoulder just a little too long, he did not pull away this time. That night, the line shattered. The one line that should never have been crossed was broken forever. For her, it was triumph. For him, it was guilt. But guilt did not stop what had been set in motion, because once a forbidden door is opened, it rarely ever closes again. And from that night forward, their lives would never be the same. The affair had begun. It was no longer glances, no longer touches, no longer accidents. It was real, and it was dangerous. Every secret meeting, every stolen night, every whispered excuse pulled them deeper into a pit they could never climb out of. And while the world still saw a happy family, a rich couple in Lagos with a proud mother watching over them, the truth was rotting them from the inside. The mother-in-law had won the first battle. She had seduced her son-in-law. But what she did not realize was that victory always comes at a price. And soon, that price would be more than any of them could bear. What you are about to hear is not just a story. It is a confession, a true account of how desire, once unleashed, does not stop where you expect it to. When boundaries fall, when family ties are twisted, when what is sacred is broken, love becomes poison. This is Lagos, a city where mansions hide secrets more dangerous than slums, a city where betrayal wears perfume, where shame hides behind tinted glass, where power can bury sins, but never kill them. If you are here now, I invite you, subscribe to this channel. Because these stories are not fairy tales. They are real. They are raw. And they hold lessons too heavy to ignore. And stay with me, because you will hear how a secret affair turned into a storm that destroyed a home. And at the center of it, a pregnancy no one expected. The night they first crossed the line should have been the end. It should have been a mistake quickly buried, a regret locked away forever. But temptation rarely ends with once. Instead, it became the beginning of a cycle of excuses, of stolen hours, of whispers and touches and doors locked behind them. The mansion in Lekki, once a symbol of wealth and family pride, became their hiding place. Its walls, painted in cream and gold, now carried the echoes of betrayal. The rooms that had hosted pastors, politicians, and business leaders now sheltered a forbidden intimacy no one could imagine. For the son-in-law, guilt clung to him like a second skin. Every time he touched his wife, he felt the shadow of her mother between them. Every time his daughter laughed, he wondered if the joy would vanish, if the truth was known. But guilt is a heavy thing, and heavy things often sink into silence instead of surfacing. And so he kept going back to her, back to the woman who should have been untouchable. For the mother-in-law, there was no guilt, only hunger. Each time he returned, her confidence grew. Each time he gave in, her hold on him tightened. She began to believe he was not just her daughter's husband, he was hers too. The wife, the daughter, remained blind. Lagos is a city that rewards ambition, but punishes attention. She was climbing in her career, attending meetings in Victoria Island, traveling for deals in Abuja, chasing contracts that would cement her as one of the youngest female executives in her industry. She was proud of her husband, proud of her mother, proud of the life they had built. She saw no reason to doubt, no cracks in the mirror. To her, their closeness was normal. Her mother loved her husband, respected him, even spoiled him sometimes. She thought it was family harmony, not betrayal. But whispers in Lagos move faster than truth. Neighbors noticed, drivers noticed, maids noticed. Glances lingered too long. Visits were too frequent. A perfume that did not belong to the wife lingered in the corridors. Rumors began to form like clouds before a storm. But rumors in Lagos are like smoke, easy to dismiss until the fire finally burns the house. The mother-in-law became bolder. She would arrive unannounced when she knew her daughter was away. She would call late at night with excuses that demanded his presence. She would find ways to remind him that she was not just a mother. She was a woman. And though he told himself it was wrong, he could not stop. Lagos is filled with distractions, but no distraction is more dangerous than one that feels like home. She was in his home. She was trusted. She was part of the family. And yet she was the very thing destroying it. Each time he tried to pull away, she pulled him deeper. She reminded him of the risk, but turned that risk into fuel. She reminded him of the guilt, but turned that guilt into passion. It was not love. It was obsession. And obsessions do not end quietly. Months passed. And then, the mother-in-law began to change. She became quieter in public but restless in private. Her appetite shifted, her body changed, and soon she could no longer ignore the truth. A pregnancy test in her bathroom confirmed it. 2 lines. Clear. Unmistakable. She was carrying her son-in-law's child. At first, she laughed, a twisted laughter that filled her empty house. To her, it was victory, proof that he was hers, that their bond was deeper than flesh. But then came the fear. What would she say to her daughter? What would Lagos say? What would society say about a woman pregnant for the man who married her child? Secrets in Lagos are heavy, and pregnancies are secrets that cannot stay hidden forever. When she told him, his world collapsed. It was one thing to betray his wife. It was another to betray her with her own mother. But pregnancy was different. Pregnancy meant permanence. Pregnancy meant exposure. Pregnancy meant the end of everything. He begged her to hide it, to end it, to bury the mistake. But she refused. To her, this was not a mistake. This was destiny. This was her triumph over a life that had left her unloved for too long. And in that moment, he realized the truth. What had begun as seduction was no longer in his control. He was trapped. The mansion in Lekki was no longer just a house of betrayal. It was now a house carrying a secret child. A child born of desire, shame, and twisted love. The mother-in-law stood proud, her hand over her stomach, convinced she had won. The son-in-law stood broken, his hands over his face, convinced his world was ending. And the daughter, still blind, still smiling, still believing in her perfect marriage, was about to have her entire life shattered in a way no woman should ever endure. Because secrets always grow, and this one had already taken root inside the mother who should have protected her. The conclusion to a story so twisted that even Lagos, with all its scandals and secrets, could not ignore it. A mother-in-law who crossed the line, a son-in-law trapped by lust and guilt, a daughter who lived in blindness until the truth exploded in her face. If you are watching this right now, let me pause and ask, have you subscribed? Because stories like this, stories of betrayal, desire, and destruction, are not meant to entertain alone. They are warnings. They are mirrors. They are reminders that even in the most beautiful homes, shadows can destroy everything. So stay with me until the very last second. Because what begins with pregnancy ends in tragedy, shame, and lessons that will echo long after this video ends. At first, the pregnancy was a secret only she and her son-in-law shared. The mother-in-law wore her victory like perfume. She walked with a new confidence, spoke with a new authority. In her mind, she was no longer just the mother. She was the woman who had conquered her daughter's husband, the woman carrying his child. But Lagos has sharp eyes. It notices changes. It whispers quickly. The neighbors saw her glow. The staff noticed her new appetite. The driver overheard conversations that did not sound like mother and son-in-law. And slowly, the cracks began to widen. The son-in-law grew restless. He snapped easily. He drank more. His business partners noticed the difference. His friends pulled away. Something in him was breaking, and though no one could name it, everyone felt it. Meanwhile, the wife, still blind, still trusting, began to notice small shifts. A phone call that ended too quickly. A strange silence when she entered a room. A mother who was suddenly too protective of her son-in-law, too quick to defend him, too eager to be present in their home. Her instincts whispered, but love deafens instincts, and so she silenced the voice inside her until the truth could no longer be hidden. It happened on a humid Lagos afternoon. She had returned from a business trip earlier than expected. She entered her mother's home, looking for comfort, only to find a sound she was never meant to hear. The voice of her husband, raised, trembling, clashing with her mother's whispers. She stood frozen at the door, and then, like thunder rolling across the sky, the words hit her ears. End this pregnancy before everything is destroyed. Her world collapsed in a single second. She burst in, demanding answers. And in that moment, the silence said more than any denial could. Her mother's hand on her stomach, her husband's eyes full of guilt and fear. The truth was naked. Her husband had betrayed her. Her mother had betrayed her. The child in her mother's womb was the proof. The daughter fell to the floor, screaming, sobbing, shaking with a pain no words could contain. It was not just betrayal. It was betrayal wrapped in blood. The very woman who birthed her had stolen her husband. Lagos says betrayal is common. But this was unthinkable. What followed was chaos. The mansion became a battlefield. The daughter locked herself in her room, refusing food, refusing comfort, her cries echoing through the hallways. The staff whispered in corners. The neighbors gossiped over fences, and soon the story spilled into the streets. Friends stopped calling. Business partners pulled away. The family name, once a symbol of power, was dragged through mud. The son-in-law's empire began to crumble. Contracts were lost, investors withdrew, and even those who had once admired him now turned their backs. The mother-in-law, however, refused to hide. She carried her pregnancy with pride, as if it was proof of her womanhood restored. She told herself she had finally claimed what life had denied her, but Lagos society is ruthless. It forgives many things, but not this. She became a pariah. Once respected, now mocked. Once envied, now pitied. Even her closest friends abandoned her. Because in Lagos, betrayal is not just personal, it is public. The daughter left. She packed her things and disappeared from Lagos for months. Her heart was shattered, her trust destroyed. She wandered between cities, searching for healing in silence. Friends reached out, but she answered no one. For her, the pain was not just in losing her husband, it was in losing her mother. The son-in-law was left hollow. He had destroyed his marriage, his reputation, his empire. Even as he tried to rebuild, the shame followed him. Every room he entered, he felt eyes on him. Every handshake felt heavy with judgment. The mother-in-law gave birth in silence. No celebration, no joy, only whispers. She held her child, but even as she rocked the baby, the world outside condemned her. In time, the daughter returned, stronger, quieter, different. She did not come back to reclaim her marriage. She came back to reclaim her life. She built herself anew, not as a wife, not as a daughter, but as a woman who had faced betrayal and survived. Her story became a lesson whispered across Lagos, that even when family betrays you, healing is possible. And so, this story ends not with victory, but with scars. A mother lost her daughter. A man lost his honor. A woman lost her innocence. And Lagos? Lagos simply moved on, as it always does. Another scandal added to its archives, another lesson buried in its streets. But for those who lived it, the pain will never leave. This is why I tell you these stories. Not for gossip, not for entertainment, but for truth. Because desire, when unchecked, destroys. Because betrayal, when born in secret, always grows into something louder than silence. And because love, no matter how strong, can shatter when trust is broken. If you've stayed with me until now, I thank you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do so now. Because stories like this are not just tales, they are warnings. This was the story of a mother-in-law who seduced her son-in-law until she got pregnant. A story of betrayal, a story of shame, a story of survival, and above all, a reminder. The strongest families are not the ones with the biggest houses, but the ones with the deepest loyalty.